put out a 12 APS-C lenses that you'll love video, and you guys were quick to point out that I may have missed some. So this is a follow-up video where I'm adding 6 more lenses to that list. If you haven't seen that video, I'll leave it in the description. After this video is done, please don't recommend any more to me because I'm pretty much lensed out. Okay, drop the ones that I miss in the comments. Because I don't have an unlimited budget, I reached out to Viltrox and to Sirui to ask them to send me some of these lenses that you guys requested so that I could try them out and then report my findings to you guys. And I also rented a Sigma lens. This video is not being sponsored by any of those companies. In fact, this video is not being sponsored at all. But if you would like to support the channel, make sure to like this video and subscribe. I'll leave links to all of these lenses and their different mounts in the description. Just like my other 12 APS-C lens video, I'm gonna show you samples and examples while I tell you about each of the lenses, what I like, and also where I had some issues with some of them. I left project files of some of the shots that I got with these lenses in the description in case you want to download those shots and see how they look on your editing rigs. I also made sure to choose lenses that have more than just one mounting option in case you own a camera body that's different than what I have. Without further ado, let's jump right in today on the Film Alliance. The Viltrox 25mm f1.7 is our very first lens, and actually it's a lens that gets released today on the release of this video. The Viltrox 25mm f1.7 is coming in at $176 US. This prime lens is so cheap, if you don't have it already, I would highly recommend you pick one up or budget for one. I have used this lens as my main BTS lens for the last several videos that I've created, and it's becoming one of my favorite everyday carry lenses. It currently comes in Sony E mount, Nikon Z mount, and Fuji X mount, and this church shot was shot on my Sony a6700. This 25mm has an equivalent focal length of about 40mm on a full frame camera, so if you find yourself in that sweet spot between a nifty 50 and a wide lens, then this would be your go-to lens. I never felt like I had to back way up to get the shot. In fact, a lot of times I was able to get more artistic close-up shots like this glistening snow on the log. The fast f1.7 aperture really gives a nice blurriness to my background, and it has a 52mm filter thread if you want to add filters to the end of it. Also, this lens makes for great low light shooting. It's extremely light, and it almost looks like the kit lens that comes with my Sony or my Fuji cameras, except the image quality is so much better than a kit lens. Autofocus is fast, and it does not slow Sony's autofocus system down, but I do think if I had this on a Fuji camera, it might be a little bit more slow, not because of the lens, but because of the Fuji camera, as we will see later in this video. But I also found it to be extremely sharp, just like my Viltrox 13mm f1.4. And I love the sun flares that these Viltrox lenses put out. One common complaint people might have about lenses that are on a budget like this is the build quality and their long-term use. While the optics might be surprisingly good for the price, only time will tell on how it will hold up. When it gets real use over a long period of time and it sees different weather environments, or the glass has been cleaned 2,000 times, that's when we really start to see how durable a lens is. But as far as I'm concerned, I've had it for about a month and it checks all of the boxes for me. Next, we have the Sniper Series Sirui 23mm f1.2. And this lens is coming in right now at $279 US. And it was released sometime around November of 2023, and it has an average Amazon rating of 4.3. Sirui is known for making manual focus anamorphic lenses, and this 23mm is one of Sirui's autofocus primes. I use this lens with the Fuji XM5, so all of my photography and video shots that you will see right now were shot on that camera. This lens came to me in a package of 3 different lenses, and I'll talk about the other primes later in the video. It comes as a Sony E mount, a Fuji X mount, or a Nikon Z mount. Using this 23mm on an APS-C camera would give me about 35mm equivalent on a full frame camera, which means this would be my go-to when it comes to doing headshots. But quickly take a look at the autofocus pumping that's going on in the background. I know Fuji doesn't have the best autofocus system, and that could be the culprit of this focus pumping. And like I mentioned before, it's hard to tell how good autofocus is with these lenses when you're using Fuji cameras. So when I was using this pair together, I would let the Fuji do the focusing, and then once it focused on my subject, I would switch it over to manual focus, like this symmetrical landscape shot, and then I wouldn't have to worry about any focus pumping. I would also use this lens for product video, photography, and city architecture along with street photography. f1.2 makes this lens really nice for low light environments, and it gives a super blurry background. Just look at this bokeh. This lens is 93 millimeters long, so if you plan on using it with a similar camera like the Fuji X-M5, then I would recommend picking up a cage because the camera itself will become pretty front heavy. If you have a bigger camera with a bigger grip, then you shouldn't have any issues. It's not the lightest lens in the world, it's also not the heaviest. It comes in at 380 grams. This lens is built well, it's built to last, it's definitely not plasticky, and the lens color comes in white, black, and silver. These lenses have no weather sealing, so you have to be careful on where you're shooting in inclement weather. I was under an umbrella for this snowy shot, and it was pretty stressful to make sure no snow got onto the lens. This lens is super sharp, and you can see with this shot, the colors are true to life. There is a USB-C port on the back here, so you can quickly update your lens, and it also has a 58mm thread on the end of it in case you want to add some filters. This lens only has a focusing ring and no buttons, so nothing really fancy there, and the sun flare color has a green magenta hue to it. This lens is great for focusing in. But now let's talk about a lens that gives you a wider look. The next lens we have is one of my new favorite lenses, the Sigma 10-18 f2.8. Right now it's priced at the highest out of all of these lenses, coming in at $600 US. It was released in October of 2023, and it has an average of 4.7 stars on Amazon, which makes it the highest rated lens on my list. If you're a vlogger or an everyday content creator, then this will be your lens. This lens comes in Canon RF, Fuji X, L mount, and Sony E mount. I used it primarily with my Sony a6700 and my Sony ZV-E10. So all the shots that you see in this section are from one of those two cameras. This is my go-to lens for low light shooting, not only outdoors, but also dimly lit interiors, which means it would be a great lens for weddings and or ceremonies, where you're not gonna have a lot of control over your lighting. It makes whatever space you're in look so much bigger without giving too much of that fisheye distortion that you might see on other wide angle cameras or lenses like a GoPro. And this is an important fact because wide angle lenses do tend to make your image look unrealistic. For anybody who's ever shot a wedding, think about how nice it would be to have an APS-C camera with this APS-C lens on it all day. I've used this lens a ton for a lot of my behind the scenes shootings for all of my latest YouTube videos where I'm either versing a camera versus a phone camera or a phone camera versus a phone camera. This lens was able to pull in enough light to make these shots look very good. I don't see a lot of fringing around these neon lights, and I love the halation effect the glass gives to these lights when we're in the nighttime environment. You don't even need to add a Pro Mist filter, although if you wanted to add one, the filter size is 67mm. When I take the focal length all the way to 10mm, the videos I was able to get with my Sony a6700 almost look like I am using a gimbal. For anyone who knows how the a6700's stabilization is, it's not the greatest in the world, but when you put this lens on it, you can kind of do slow movements and make it look super stabilized. Out of all of these lenses, I would say the Sigma lens gives you the truest to life colors. It's not too saturated, but it's also not too neutral either. Another great use case for this camera would be branding. You can get some really great looking artistic shots for a client who owns a small shop. Like I mentioned, the low light performance is spectacular with this lens, so you should be able to get some great restaurant shots as well. The bokeh on this lens is also still very nice looking, even though the aperture goes down to f2.8, not as fast as these other lenses, but it still gives a nice look. I think someone could purchase this lens as their all-around lens and make some money with it because it's such a portable lens for video and photography. It's also very sharp, but sometimes you don't need that wide look when you're showcasing a product or a brand. And in that case, I would go with this next lens. The Sirui 56mm f1.2 comes in at $279 US, and it was released sometime around November of 2023. And it has an average rating of 4.3 stars on Amazon. This is my go-to lens for tight shots where I need some separation between my foreground and my background. Right now, it comes in Sony E mount, Fuji X mount, and Nikon Z. Just look at that glass and how it's got that signature green hue that we get with all of these different Sirui lenses. It only has a focusing ring on the side, so no buttons or dials, which makes you focus on your craft more than all of the technical aspects that another lens might give you. I also use this lens with the Fuji X-M5, so all of the shots that you're going to be seeing are from that camera. This is my product shooting lens. Just look at how the background melts away while I'm keeping the subject in focus. I also use this lens as a branding commercial lens, and I was super excited with its performance. I got a lot of people asking on which camera or lens setup is best for them, and I always say it depends on what you're shooting. But in this case, if you were to shoot any type of commercial work or doing some type of branded video, then this may be your lens. When I pair it with the Fuji X-M5, the stabilization isn't the best, so I wouldn't recommend that you walk around with this lens or film video while you're walking. If anything, just plant your feet on the ground and sway side to side like I was able to do with this shot right here. But for the most part, as long as I stand completely still or use a monopod, I'm able to get my shots to look great. Sometimes people get hyper-focused on the camera sensors and how they reproduce skin tones, and I think that lenses have a lot to do with it. In this case, the 56mm reproduces the skin tones spot on, and I'm not seeing anything off. I'm not seeing any hues or different colors in the skin tones, and I don't think this is from Fuji sensor because I've used other lenses with the Fuji camera and my skin tones are a bit off. So when it comes to skin tones, these Sirui lenses are great, but I'm especially appreciative of how the background just blurs out and gives me a super sharp foreground. Here's another shot where we see the autofocus kind of going in and out. So I would recommend, just like I did before, if you're using the Fuji X-M5 or another Fuji camera, to get your focus in place and then switch it over to manual focus. That way it doesn't pump. It has a 58mm size filter thread on the end of it, just like the other two Sirui lenses in this video. So if you were to get all three primes, you would only need to get one filter and then you could swap them out in between the lenses. This lens has the biggest bokeh spheres out of all of these lenses, in case that's important to you. Now let's jump into our next lens. The Viltrox 27mm f1.2 is the portrait lens of the year, in my opinion. Right now, it's selling for $578 US, which makes it the second most expensive lens on this list. It was released in August of 2023, and it has an average Amazon rating of 4.4. It does have some bells and whistles that these other lenses don't have, like a soft click aperture ring. It also has an autofocus manual focus toggle and a manual focus hold button. I use this lens with the ZVE10 Mark I and the A6700, and so all the shots that you're gonna see were shot on either of those two cameras. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a very sharp lens. I'm not using any professional lighting, only the interior lighting for this shot right here. And how about them apples? This lens is weather sealed, so you can get shots like this without having to worry too much about water getting into your lens. Although I don't know how far I would push that. Just like our other lenses with f1.2, you can see how buttery that background is and how it really brings the subject out in the foreground. The bokeh from this lens is probably one of my favorites, especially when the spheres start to converge, as you can see in the bottom of the frame. I would also use this lens as a nature lens, although it's pretty heavy, so you would want to make sure that you have a good grip on whatever camera it is that you're using. I love getting outside and finding different angles of things like this in nature. It has a 67mm filter thread on the end of it. Skin tones look real and good, just like my other Viltrox lens. So if you're a skin tone shooter, this is a great choice. Don't forget that the lighting and the camera sensor also play huge roles when it comes to skin tones, but overall everything that I saw with this lens, it did a great job. This lens fits X mount, E mount, and Z mount. Although the lens before this, the Sirui 56mm f1.2, comes in as my product shooting lens, this comes in as a close second. When you're doing interior lighting shots like this, the f1.2 really comes in handy because you don't have to crank up your ISO. You can just open up the aperture. If I primarily did shorts or reels for Instagram, then this would be my lens. And the reason I say that is because when you shoot these types of shots and you're living in the real life and you're only using the lighting that's available, you may find yourselves in tricky lighting situations like this album store. And in that case, the f1.2 really helps. The sun color and the flare also look great. I love those prominent star stripes that we get when we shoot it at the sun. It kind of reminds me of Tamron lenses. Now let's jump into our next lens. Right now, the Sirui 33mm f1.2 is selling for $279 US, and it comes in Sony E mount, Fuji X mount, and Nikon Z. It was released sometime around November of 2023, and it has an average Amazon rating of 4.2. This 33mm lens is the equivalent of about 50mm on a full frame camera, which is also equivalent to what your actual human eyes see. So whenever you use a focal length that's super wide, you're gonna get a fisheye distortion on the outside of the frame. And if you were to use a telephoto lens, everything's gonna look a little bit larger than it actually is in real life. So this lens is perfect for getting those close-up shots if you want something that looks as close to humanly realistic as possible. This would be my nature documentary lens, and it's because it is a prime lens, it's gonna be a lot sharper than a zoom lens. Of course, I would have a telephoto lens with me, but this would be my secondary or maybe my primary lens, depending on what it is that I'm shooting. It's got some great looking bokeh, especially when you're using it in low light situations. And it's a great street lens for people who are window shoppers. Just look at how shiny that watch is. This would be my headshot lens if I was a YouTuber who made videos about lenses and uploaded them to YouTube, because my face would not be as distorted as some of my other lenses. Skin tones don't look too far off either, but I do see a little bit of a difference between the shots. That could just be from lighting. The saturation looks good, and for this shot I had to crank up my aperture so you can see everything is in focus. But if I was to put an ND filter on it, I would need a filter thread of, let's see if you can remember from the other two Sirui lenses, 58 millimeters. This lens is not weather sealed either. So if you get a shot like this, you're gonna have to make sure you're either under an umbrella or you're under a rooftop of some sort. But once the snow stops and the sun comes out, you really get to see how sharp this lens is and how beautiful that background looks when you're shooting at f1.2. We get that greenish hue sun color like we did with our other Sirui lenses, so nothing different here. I personally love that look. It's pretty cinematic, and that may be just because Sirui puts out those anamorphic lenses and they know how to make the shots look cinematic. The sun stars look good when I close up the aperture, but personally, I like a more defined set of spikes rather than a bunch of refracted ones. All right, let's wrap this up. After putting these 6 lenses through their paces, here's a quick rundown of each one of these lenses' strengths and weaknesses. The Viltrox 25mm f1.7 is a budget-friendly lens. It's a fantastic everyday carry lens, one that I would leave living on my camera. It's about 40 millimeters full frame equivalent. It makes it great for versatile shooting and just general shooting, and also behind the scenes footage and low light shots. Its sharpness is pleasing. I like its sun flares. And when you combine all of that with a very affordable price, it makes it a solid choice for someone who may be on a budget who needs a really solid prime lens. The Sirui 23mm f1.2 is an excellent lens for headshots and product photography and architectural type shots. The super fast f1.2 aperture delivers a beautiful bokeh and a strong low light performance, but be mindful of potential autofocus pumping, especially if you're using it on Fuji camera systems. If you're shooting with that camera, manual focus may be your preferred method of focusing. The Sigma 10-18 f2.8 would be my top pick if I was a vlogger or a content creator who needed an ultra wide zoom lens, which offers exceptional low light capabilities and minimal distortion. It also excels in interior shots like the church shots that I showed you for weddings and photography. And it's got a true to life color rendition, which makes it a great lens if you don't like to do a lot of post-production color grading. The Sirui 56mm f1.2 is the perfect lens for tight shots and product photography. The optics offer exceptional subject separation and beautiful background blur. Its ability to capture skin tones is accurate. It also makes it a great choice for commercial and branding videos. The Viltrox 27mm f1.2 is a great portrait lens, which delivers probably the sharpest image out of all of these lenses, and it has a buttery smooth bokeh. It does have weather sealing, making it suitable for various different lighting conditions, like say when you're in a low light situation or you're trying to shoot quick, fast, on the go, and you don't have professional lighting gear to bring along and set up. It also has that soft click aperturing, so that's good if you're on set and you're trying to quietly change your aperture. And the focus hold button is super helpful when you want to lock in your focus. The Sirui 33mm f1.2 with its 50mm full frame equivalent makes it a perfect lens if you want to get a natural perspective. This is ideal for nature documentaries or street photography and headshots. It has that fast aperture, which gives you pleasing bokeh, and it separates your subject from the background, makes it a very versatile lens for various shooting scenarios. Ultimately, the best lens depends on your specific needs and your shooting style. If you're on a budget, then I would say go with the Viltrox 25mm. If you want to get into professional portrait shooting or doing any type of low light work, you can get the Viltrox 27mm or the Sirui 56mm. Both are excellent choices. For vloggers and content creators, I would recommend picking up the Sigma 10-18, while the Sirui 23 and 33 offer specialized capabilities for specific genres. Remember that these are just my observations, and my experience lens may be different from yours. If you're really on the fence about which one of these lenses you should pick up, I did make a free lens quiz that you can take. You can input all of your answers, and then it'll send you through a funnel and land you on the proper lens for you. Also, I recommend renting these lenses. You can always rent them online. They send the lenses to your house so you can try them out for a few days before you pull the trigger and buy the lens. I hope this video helped you out. I put a lot into it, and I hope that you find the lens that's best for you. I'm Joe, and this is the Film Alliance. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next video.